Hi there, I'm 𝗵𝗵𝗀. I have been in the management and technical consulting space for 20 some odd years. We went through and did a lot of work to consolidate financial statements, and my team and I were able to help get the client on track with that. And so we're going to talk today about financial close calendars. So when you file with the SEC late, there's a number of impacts. And just a preface, I am not an accountant, I am not a lawyer, but I am an expert in data analysis, and I am an expert in process analysis, and that's why I'm talking to you about this. So just punching into my good friend 𝗵𝗲 here, some of the impacts for a non-accelerated filer with regards to filing late 10Ks and 10Qs. There's a number of things, non-monetary and monetarily, that can be affecting you. You know, they're saying that, loss of, Form S3 eligibility. So there's details of what that really means, but it basically means that it's you have to go through an S1 form, which is a lot more due diligence if you're trying to raise some short-term capital, stuff like that. You could risk a delisting procedures. You are looking at freezing of insider liquidity, which I'm sure that will make your early investors a little bit less excited. I think this is really important, especially for early days businesses. You could be entering a technical default with regards to certain covenants of your debt. That could be a problem for you. Increased cost of capital. So there's a lot of these things, professional fees, all these things can happen, and there's impact. So obviously, and I think if you just wash this aside, set this all aside, at the end of the day, as professionals, we always want to do our best, right? And that's really what, at the end of the day, we want to know that, okay, we have a target to meet, we want to achieve it. That's really the whole goal. So I did some analysis. I went through and I found companies that have filed through EDGAR, and I'm looking at the SIC code 1311, which is oil companies, where the public float is between $5 million and $250 million. So I just got this list here, and this is in my database. I'm doing some analysis on the market, so that's where I did. So let's look at something I've built here. So I built this analysis tool so that it gives me a way to visualize, and I'm not trying to pick on these companies. These just happen to be the ones that fall in this bucket. This analysis gives me a quick visual to show what's going on with regards to the filing history since 2021 and to current. So just this is I know the CIK code, their SIC is 1311, as I said, crude petroleum, $66 million float, non-accelerated, and their year end is December 31st. Okay, so just looking through, there's an intermix of the quarterlies and the annuals here, and so the chart shows there's this yellow line here, which kind of blends in with the gold here, but I should probably change that. But anyway, so 45 days as a non-accelerated for the quarterlies, and 90 days for the annuals. And this particular company has been filing late. I can see on the list here, and they're struggling to kind of get everything kind of filed on time here. So this heat map gives us a good presentation of what's what. These 2 quarters here, 2024, Q2 and 3, on time, exactly on the day. And I can see, their performance in terms of filing timings is declining based on our analysis. Almost 90% of their filings have been late. So unfortunate for Prime Energy, that's just where things are going. Looking at Laredo Oil, similar notion here. We got a lot of overages on all their timings. Again, 90%, but they are improving slightly. So the timing is improving. Again, these guys have a $17 million float. 𝗵𝗲, I guess I hope I'm saying that right. $14 million float, and so they've had some successes. They're filing pretty much on time for most annuals and whatnot. And then in this last fiscal, look at that huge improvement here. And so they made a big improvement here, but then something slipped here in the last little bit here. So I'm not sure. There must be a story behind that. Some big changes, updates. And these guys are doing pretty good here. Like, there's a lot of quarters here and some annuals. Like, look, these annuals are way under schedule. So they're doing a good job here. One they filed right on time. So they're doing it right. So these are small guys. There was only $5 million float, but it just goes to show that if you start early on with the right process, you can get on top of it, stay on top of it. So, and I know things, as you get more complicated, your organizational changes, things can change. So I'm going to show you this last one. This is the client I worked with in the past, and so just as a preface, I cannot take credit for their current success. but I can take credit for early day success back in when they started off on this path. So I am very happy to see that they have kept up with their filing and they're continually improving here over time here. So I'm really happy to see that looking back many years later. They kept on top of it. So good on them. That's really good. But the picture of success, why are we even talking about this? Because obviously there's three things you want to do with your financial close. You want to get the data, you want it faster with fewer manual touches, and you want to eliminate coding and transcription types errors, right? And then once you've got the data, now you can consolidate it. Now you can kind of like, okay, now let's crunch the numbers, so to speak. But everything should tie together with high confidence, and the supports need to be trustworthy. So if you're looking at DD&A, you want to make sure that the supporting documentation is actually valid and true, and is not based on subjective measures. You want to make sure that it's you can rely on that, because at the end of the day, and I know this is where everyone who is listening to this really wants to get to this point of analysis. You're not just a bean counter as a CFO, as a controller. Your job is to help shepherd the financial success of the organization, and you can't do that if you don't have time to actually analyze what do these numbers mean for us, right? And that's the happy hunting ground objective. I think the picture of success means you're not rushing, right? You're not rushing to an external timeline. You're marching to get business value and analyze what those numbers actually mean in your organization. So let's talk about how to tackle this process, how to tackle the problem of your financial close, and start to think about it maybe a little bit differently, so that you can start to massage how you're approaching it, so you can sort of shrink that window, so you can buy more time within the close calendar. So let's just say, for argument's sake, you've got 5 major steps of what you need to do in your financial close, whatever they are. Now, that's all well and good, but underneath the hood, as well as I do, there's lots of little things you got to do. There's a lot of things you got to go through, a lot of steps. But really, what I would do as a first step is take inventory. What are all the individual pieces of activity you need to do to get your close completed, right? So, starts with people. I'll always look through these things through the lens of the 3 critical areas of people, process, technology. People. Who's involved, okay? And really, this, you've got familiarity with this when it comes to segregation of duties. So you know who's doing certain things already. But let's talk, the next step is about process. And this is really drilling into, why are we doing this step? What is it that has to happen? And when does it need to be done? And then the last one is technology. And I'll just summarize this one by just saying, how are we doing it? Because that's really what the technology is there to do. It's just to, replace manually writing it on a piece of paper with a piece of software. Okay, so that's kind of how I look at that. At the end of the day, your inventory should really kind of address, what is the happy path? What do I mean by that? A happy path is just, if you're going from A to Z, what are the individual steps that must happen in the right order at the right time for everything to go perfectly? And just ignoring for the moment what could go wrong. Then, along that happy path, you want to identify for each of these little squares you see on that screen there, those little colored boxes, what are the discrete inputs you need to make that happen? Okay, so I need these numbers from this report, I need those numbers from that report, I need to get so-and-so to email me such and such. Those are the inputs. The transformations, what is it that I need to work on in that step? And then outputs, how do I know it's complete? I know it's complete because now I've produced this interim metric, or this particular piece of financial data, or whatever the case may be. Now next, you need to start looking at these boxes and start assigning metrics. So we want to be able to measure, because if you're not measuring, you're not going to make any success in getting your financial close calendar any faster at all, because you're going to miss pieces, you're not going to have alignment. So what is the duration of time it takes from A to B to C to collect the inputs, produce the transformations, and generate the output for each of those tasks? And then, so that's a duration. So that might start on a Monday and it might end on a Friday. That's duration, okay? But the effort involved because if you think about the inputs might be, I need to get an email. That means I have to send someone an email. Please, Bob, can you send me this report? And then you're doing this interfacing back and forth, and that's effort. I may only spend an hour on Monday, 2 hours on Tuesday, do nothing until Thursday, Friday when I wrap it up for another 4 hours. That's the effort, so the actual time, hands on keyboard, actually doing the work. The frequency. Some of these things you do it once. Some of them you do it numerous times. So it's those cycle times. It's the frequency in which you're doing a certain thing. For example, I'll pick on spreadsheets. Sometimes you got to work multiple copies of spreadsheets. And then what you also need to start tracking are errors. When my input forms are incorrect, you start to log, okay, Bob sent me the wrong one. Okay, error 1. Okay, the formulas were broken on the spreadsheet for error 2, and so on. So you start to itemize and document these so you have a picture, right? You need to know, okay, once we understand this logging of all these errors, now you can start to address them. Some of them are going to have higher priority, some of them are going to have lower priority. Now I'm going to give you 3 strategies that you can use to go after these things. So once you've itemized, you've got your inventory, you're now measuring, you're tracking, now you can start making changes. I wouldn't do any changes until you've actually done those last few steps. So starting with the strategy 1, consolidation. Now that you've got the big picture, you might look at this and say, you know what, we can actually combine a few of these things because we're actually kind of, once we realize, okay, well actually these are actually the same thing or very, very similar. If we just did a couple more things at that time, we can do these both and kind of check them off at the same time. So you're wasting fewer cycles. I moved some gray ones over here, some purple ones over there. You're kind of doing the same related tasks with the same people at the same time. And so you're getting that synergy and you're reducing what's called task switching. So task switching is when if I'm doing function A and then I got to go check my email and then I got to take a phone call and then I got to go to a meeting, your task switching is very disruptive. But if you stack these functions together so that you're preparing all these things in the same time, then you have a flow, right? That person can work through solid 2 hours. And you'll be a lot more productive than if you did 15 minutes on Monday and 20 minutes on Friday. You know what I mean? Then the next strategy is rationalization. Once you've seen these big picture things, now we're able to say, well, you know what? Actually, we don't actually need this anymore. This is no longer on the happy path. So let's just bop these things out. We can get to another way, or we can just enhance one of these other tasks we're doing to get to the same information. That's the rationalization. Once you've done those 2 exhaustively, you're measuring, you're making sure that your process is going well, now's the time to talk about automation. Automation is, let's make things system-y, and we use technologies, whatever way we want to do it. You know, we've identified certain errors. The way we can identify those and fix those errors is, let's automate that. Let's have something that automatically copies from spreadsheet A to spreadsheet B, and then it can tell us when there's problems before we even copy it over, right? So we can have portals, we can have different automated reports, we can have all sorts of things that can happen so that your team isn't manually consolidating data anymore, and all these external these legacy systems that are kicking around. You got multiple ERPs because you've done a few acquisitions. Time to dump all that stuff out, get into a consolidated way, and then have systems do the work. Let's use humans for human things, not humans for system things. So we can talk about, we can drill into those. There's a lot of ways to automate. 3 strategies that I've given you, and if you wanted to reach out and talk to me, I can talk to you further about what's working in your situation or what's not working in your situation. If you'd like me to run one of those reports on your business that I showed for those companies, send me a direct message on LinkedIn. That's probably the best way to get a hold of me. You can find me timonlinkedin.com. And then my calendar is at sushivithtim.com if you want to just book a time with me. We can talk in confidence. So that is my presentation for today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you are going to be able to close your calendar faster, better, and with armed with a little bit more information on how to do that.